The celebrations are known as Stonewall, and the emblem, the papier-mâché rock, was constructed in Sydney by members of the gay Anglican group known as Angays. Outlook spoke with one of the organisers, Bill Calder, about Gay Pride Week.
Well, Stonewall first started in 1969. There was a gay bar in New York. As part of the second year that I was involved with Stonewall, we decided that we needed a little hook, some sort of media stunt, and we decided that we'd tow a papier-mâché rock from Sydney to Melbourne. Various bits of symbolism attached to it. It was a rock, which is a defiant gesture, the message tied to the rock. It was an act of cooperation between the two cities. The first real journalist job I had was editing Rabelais, the student newspaper at La Trobe Uni, and that was a fabulous year. It's very exciting in a student environment, and you have lots of freedom to do things, and lots of opportunity to learn things. And that it confirmed in me I wanted to be a real journalist. It was a great idea to start Brother Sister, but nobody had worked out a business plan or a budget even for that matter particularly. It started with lots of adrenaline and enthusiasm and emotion, and after about 4 issues it spent its meagre resources and had no immediate likelihood of getting in enough money to keep going. I think there was a great deal of community support right from the beginning. People wanted it to keep going. There was always that encouragement to keep going. And I think there were people involved who were determined to see it through. The job of the media, certainly as a publisher of the paper, I mean, the media has to be exciting. You have to have an edge. You can't be just dull. Nobody wants to read dull. So, I think it's important that Brother Sister stays interesting and that we do things with a bit of an edge every now and again just to keep it exciting. My goal always is to try and be as inclusive as possible. I've always wanted a newspaper to appeal to as wide a range of people as it can. Obviously we have to define a market, and that's a gay and lesbian market primarily. Then within that community to embrace all elements of the community. In many ways I think our greatest achievement was a very simple achievement, and that is that we put out a good quality paper every fortnight, and that paper, by hitting the streets, said gay is good. And I think that in a world where the opposite message is often spoken, I think just that simple message of saying gay is good is very profound.
Good evening, and welcome to the first of NTV's Profile Specials. Tonight we have Brother Sister, a tribute. Now you've just heard from the publisher of Brother Sister, Bill Calder, and Bill joins us in the studio now. Thank you very much for joining us, Bill. Good evening.
Good evening, Remy.
And also joining us in the studio is a previous employee of Brother Sister who now works for, let me get this, First Publications. He's the editorial coordinator for Beat magazine, Fashion Journal and Play, Andrew Mast. Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening.
How are you both? Now, I'm going to start with my first question to you, Bill. What kind of a publication do you think that Brother Sister was in its 8 years?
I think that we actually decided to take the commercial path with the paper. It was important, that decision, in terms of being able to pay people, being able to make sure the paper came out on time, and to raise the production standards and content standards. Everything flows from that, though, in some ways.
All right, so journalistically speaking, what kind of a paper does that end up looking like?
Well, because to be commercially viable, we're dependent on advertising. Advertisers are advertising not because they love us, but because they're out to make money. So they want results for their advertising dollar. We had a range of packages with advertising. We would provide editorial support in differing environments. So there's that immediate impact in terms of the stories we wrote. We also didn't have a huge number of advertisers, so we didn't want to lose any of them. So there's a subtle influence too on the paper in terms of what they might want it to be. So that was the kind of environment that we operated in.
All right, so you need to basically try and reach as many people as possible. How do you think that Brother Sister went around doing that?
I think Brother Sister pretty much reflected how the queer community had changed in that actual 8-year period. And I think when Brother Sister started, it was very much a cutting-edge, queer, almost underground paper, and reported very sort of good news that wasn't being heard anywhere else. And then I think you saw it change into a more commercial venture. It was still getting out there, but I think you saw the politics of the gay community sort of get very quiet and go further underground, while the street press became actually more a mainstream concern as, I guess, you know, the club part of the gay community came to the fore. I think the street press went with that and generally reflected that sort of thing. So they were getting out there, still getting out to a lot of people. I think communities changed and the paper did change with them, and they are still getting out to the general gay community, if you can use that term.
Right. I'll just open it to both of you now. I mean, what do you think are the responsibilities of a gay publication to the gay community?
Well, I saw it as being our primary responsibility to broaden the distribution as much as we could, to reach as many people as we could, to provide information about the community, to be a vehicle to discuss issues within the community. So, look, I accepted the mainstreaming of the paper as being a way to make it a paper with popular appeal and popular reach, and I embraced that approach. So I saw that as the primary function of Brother Sister. Other publications can play different roles, but I define that as Brother Sister's primary function.
Is it difficult in such a small community to bring news without treading on toes?
It's a very difficult thing to do. That's also difficult to do in the mainstream press, and you'll see that there's very little independent mainstream media. So you do have to think about what's best for everyone involved, and there were very difficult decisions to be made during the years. But I think eventually you do get really hard-hitting stories. You do have to break them, like you have to do it, and you've tread on toes. You know, the toes will heal, or the people whose toes you tread on, if they were being wrongdoing or something like that, well, they've disappeared from the picture, so you've done the right thing. But it's a balancing act.
The truth, ultimately the truth has to be told. I mean, as Andrew says, there's gung-ho, shove people's faces in it, and a softer approach. But yeah, the truth comes out.
Because Brother Sister came into a bit of you had a bit of trouble really a few years back, I believe, probably amongst a number of times, where you said something that someone didn't like. Because there was something about the Orsa Foundation and the archives that you came under some fire. Can you tell me a little bit about how you reacted to that kind of criticism?
Look, for me, I was fairly relaxed, I must admit. I wasn't on the front line. Andrew actually was more on the front line there. It was Jody, his journalist, writing the stories.
Yes, we just uncovered the facts of the gay and lesbian archives were promised a new building. It didn't happen, and we dug up the story, but we were accused of being biased towards the archives, and we weren't. We were just telling the story, but they were the things that had to come out.
All right, great. Well, we've got to finish up this segment. Thank you very much for joining us, Andrew. You'll stick around, I'm sure, Bill. Now, we've met the man who was the sole publisher of Brother Sister by the end, but what kind of man was he? What kind of background did he come from? We got together with his family and asked them a few questions.
He was a quieter child than the others. He was also a more nervous child. As far as learning to swim down on the Gippsland coast, Andrew, I suppose, was average. You make a little pool and they sit in it and gradually get deeper and deeper. Jane would take off for Tasmania. She's scared of stiff. Bill took a much longer time to get out of his little pool into the waves than either of the others.
We had a grapevine on the side fence, and we used to extract all the grubs from underneath the leaves and put them in the bird bath and get our grinding sticks out and grind them to a nice paste. So we enjoyed doing things like that as children.
I could never work out why he'd go so slowly and so carefully, but it's obviously kept him in good stead, and maybe that's how he's been successful in running a business.
I'll pop over and we'll have dinner, and we've known to sit in the lounge room and just talk about everything and just analyse society and everything. No, he's a really great uncle in that respect, and yeah, no, he's a good friend as well.
Bill got fewer beatings than the other two. Whether it was because he was younger, or whether it's because he was more cunning, I don't know. But he certainly always slid out and was not he was absent when there was a problem.
I said to him one day in the kitchen, "What is the matter, Bill?" Because we hadn't been able to unscramble it before. Bill's first reaction was, if I remember correctly, "You wouldn't want to know, Mum," and he walked out the back door. And I thought, what is going on? Have we got a pregnant girl?
Oh, I think I had a bit of shock. It took me, quite a while to get used to it.
It's probably about a year after Bill told me, and as you're driving, you're looking in the rear vision mirror, and there's Bill kissing his boyfriend in the back seat, and that was sort of like, yeah, this is real. This is what it's about.
Both my brother and I, because I've got a younger brother, Chris, we always used to talk about, Andy will have kids, and Mum and Dad have got kids, but Bill will never have kids. We knew that he was never interested in girls, never had a girlfriend, and I don't think we ever equated him as being gay as such. We couldn't give it a label, but we just knew that he was.
And, it was a slow evolving process. I mean, remember in my generation, I was in the generation where you bashed poofters, and it took a while to change that.
When I realised that Bill had gone through a fair degree of turmoil himself, understanding his sexuality, and that in those very usually troubled teen years, we hadn't a clue. Therefore, we were of no help to him at all. And I'd like to see parents better educated, better able to appreciate the signs, and I can recognise in my dotage signs now, but we were no help to Bill at all, I'm sure, in that period, and I regret that very, very much.
Hello and welcome back to our tribute to Brother Sister, one of our profiles for Ben TV. Now we are joined by Mark Werrett, who is currently working for Brother Sister and has actually been for about 8 years. Good evening, Mark.
Evening.
And of course, Alison Thorne, who you actually knew this young Bill Calder man from way back, didn't you?
Indeed, I did.
And Alison's with Radical Women at the moment. Tell me a little bit about what things were like around the time that Brother Sister started, especially connected to the women's movement.
It was very interesting what was happening in the press at that point in time. I'd been involved in gay community news, the forerunner of Outrage, and there'd been big issues about whether gay men and lesbians could work together. And I think that that's one of the things that really excited and inspired me about Brother Sister, the very name Brother Sister and the aspiration to be a paper for both gay men and lesbians.
All right. So was that something that was in the minds of the first 5 formers when you put it together?
No, certainly. Right from the beginning, the goal was very much to be an inclusive paper, to cover the entire community, and certainly the name reflected that desire.
All right. Now, the first year was a tad shaky, wasn't it?
Disaster, no business plan, just sort of, run on adrenaline and, try and find a way of getting the next one out. So yeah, no, it was sort of wild days the first year.
Right, and then sort of things change and you focus a little bit more on actually paying people and getting money.
Well, I think we focused on trying to pay the debt collectors to begin with, and eventually paying people.
Oh, all right, okay. And then, I mean, how long was it before you opened the Queensland branch?
That was in the second year. That was a bit of a flash of commercial brilliance by me, largely, thinking, oh, 2 papers will be wonderful. We'll have twice as much money coming in and much less costs going out because of infrastructure savings. It was a commercial disaster too.
All right. And so you've been with Brother Sister for 8 years. How have you seen the sort of the development of that?
Development.
Like, I mean, do you really
start
notice
off
the difference?
Oh yes. Like nowadays, it's a much more professional environment to work in. We all get paid enough, and it's. I think back in the first year, there was a lot of yelling, screaming, and hardly any laughing. I mean, nowadays there's a lot of laughing and a bit of screaming and quite often a lot of yelling, but it's all part of the process. So I think nowadays, just by looking at the paper now compared to what we were 8 years ago, is proof of the pudding that it is much better.
Okay. I mean, I think the Brother Sister's kind of been a bit of a success story, certainly financially now. Do you think the pink dollar exists? I'm just opening this to everyone now.
I think it does. I think, yes, most definitely it does exist. I'd have to say I'll be a big pink dollar spender myself.
Alison, your opinion?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't agree. I think that the queer community is in fact a community divided by class, and I'm sort of rather concerned about the big push to elevating the pink dollar. And as far as the press goes, I want to see much more voice being given to community activists.
All right. Okay. So very different opinions there. Just briefly now again to you, Bill. What's your next step after Brother Sister? You sold it to Satellite now, haven't you?
That's right. Look, I'll take 6 months off and be completely indulgent. I'll travel a bit. I'll write the great novel, and then see what life has from there.
All right. Well, we will be coming back a little bit because, shy as they are, we were able to get some of the people who have worked at Brother Sister past and present on camera, and here's some of their views on how it was to get back after that.
The way in which everything is run within Brother Sister has changed. The first time that, the small house in Albert Park that it started in, which was like 2 or 3 rooms, and that included the bathroom, which was turned into the paste-up area.
I find it very frustrating to have something be pigeonholed as just a gay magazine or even just a lesbian magazine. I think it's important, that we're all people and we all have, this common sexuality.
We have people who look after those different areas of the paper who are passionate about that area or are involved in that area of the community, then it makes it stronger, it makes it better for everyone.
The first day of Brother Sister, Bill stuck me in a very tiny corner in a dark lounge room of the house at that stage and said, there's your office. And I thought, you've got to be joking. And I was sat down on a, trying to remember the chair, I can't really remember the chair, but it was a green card table and a telephone.
One of the first papers, at least in Victoria, to be inclusive of other sexual identities too, like being bi, like I am.
Instead of taking sides in anything, I think we've reported this is what's happening, what time, place, date, whatever we have done it that way without giving our own beliefs, throwing our own beliefs in how it should run or how, something should happen.
There was probably about 3 or 4 editors and somebody doing layout, but there really wasn't anybody who had any sort of sales background or customer background, that, somebody that could pick up a client and service them.
This actually, I think, started off in the letter column. We had a bit of a debate about racism and ended up doing a special issue on racism within the gay community, and do people fetishize race and things like that, and and then the bi issue, and we've done a couple of others. So yeah, I think that's been one of our strengths.
When I was at Brother Sister, community always played an important part of the newspaper, but the commercial side of it paid for everything, so you had to really go out and garner that commercial dollar.
To report on things within the community, to provide information about, things that are of interest to the community, hopefully to inspire some debate and discussion along the way, but you know, basically to keep people interested and entertained and informed.
Now, because Satellite will be owning so many of the organisations, some people do have some worries, and actually, Alison, you share some of these, don't you?
Yes, I do indeed. I have real fears. It's very hard for grassroots socialist feminist activists like myself to get a hearing in the media, and the independent queer press was one of the places where usually we could do that. I'm concerned that really that might dry up with this monopoly basically on the queer press, so I think it's all the more important that we support the independent alternatives, publications like Lesbiana, 3CR, Bent TV, the Left Press, so that alternative ideas can really continue to get out there.
Having worked so much in the impress sector, Andrew, what's your opinion on this?
I have to agree with Alison. This is a good time to go looking for the alternatives and supporting the alternatives. Zines like Burning Times are very important for queer youth. The internet's more and more becoming the place where queer people get their information because of the obvious international links that are happening. And I think you've got radio like Joy FM and, as Alison said, Bent TV. These alternatives are out there, and it's a good time to maybe giving them support if people think that the street press is sort of going to let them down, which I think we've got a wait-and-see situation with it.
All right, okay. Well, of course, we have to talk to Mr. Successor of the evening. If we're talking about the sister, you actually have a bit of a different vision, Bill.
Look, I've always been a supporter of the national plan, the idea of a network, a national network of newspapers. There's huge advantages there in terms of being able to share editorial and also in terms of being able to develop a advertising strategy to sell space to national advertisers. So I see great potential in a national structure to improve all of the papers involved in it.
Do you think that's going to further the movement, so to speak?
Well, again, given that my approach was to try and build a strong popular-based newspaper, I think that a national network of papers is able to fulfil that type of direction in terms of making them stronger, more popularist, bigger reach. So in terms of that goal, I think it can work very well.
Cool. Great. Well, thank you all very much for coming this evening. It's time to say goodbye, as sad as it is, to Alison Thorne, Mark Wareham and Andrew Mast. Thanks for coming into the studio. And Bill, we wish you all of the best. Good luck with the novel.
Thank you.
And here are some messages from some other people who've shared some of your 8 years at Brother Sister, who'd like to wish you some good wishes as well. Have a good night. Thank you for watching.
We used to play a lot of cricket and footy out the front, and being the brother who was 4 years older, I took a particularly keen interest in seeing Bill become the next opener for Australia. And so I used to coach him, with my form of spin bowling, and Bill had, I don't think, really hit the ball very often.
He was doing journalism, so that just didn't, that was no big deal, brother, sister, as far as we were concerned.
Before Bill started up Brother Sister, his health was fine, but since Brother Sister, he's had broken ankles, cartilages, he's been in hospital a couple of times, receiving a right light for his stress, and he kind of blames me, and unfortunately he's leaving before I can give him a heart attack.
He generally does listen to reason. Sometimes you have to throw an argument at him about 5 or 6 times, but yeah, he's a very charming guy, and I've really enjoyed working with him a lot.
You've done extremely well with Brother Sister. You've taken that from nothing to obviously a worthwhile business now, so I wish you the best of luck in whatever you do.
On the case, but he was saying in my language, he said, "Kamu mau cium?" I said,
I would like to really acknowledge what Bill has achieved in the last 8 years in terms of basically starting with nothing other than a great idea and developing that and creating something that's really worthwhile and decent.
I've personally had some very cruel things said to me, and I'm quite sure a lot of other parents have too at times. I mean, you forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. But it is wide in the community, as I'm sure you know. But I'd love to see a more aggressive education project underway.
Uncle Bill's alright.
Why is it necessary to tell other people what your sexual preference is, say particularly in the workplace?
It's only necessary in that people talk. People ask you what you did on the weekend, how your kids are, stuff like that. And so if you're not gay, it's very easy, you just answer back. But if you are gay, you either have to ignore the question, lie, or explain your sexuality. So I don't think gay people want to advertise their sexuality, but just to have a normal conversation, it just comes up.